Turkey, who cares? But the economy, everyone does care. Well, it's one of the strange things about being a foreign minister of Greece at this time of crisis. There's some benefits as well, of course. Everyone wants to see you and talk to you. It would be very difficult to get on a billion TV shows a few years ago. Now, you simply have to say the Greek foreign minister in town, everyone is flocking around to see who's going to, shoot the biggest fight out of it. And, well, let's see. Let's see if this is a deserved treatment for a Greek politician, a Greek foreign minister. In 2009, in the end of it, it was revealed that Greece had the biggest and most toxic combination of debt and deficit than any other European country at the time. Greece had, it was not alone, but it violated some of the fundamental rules of the common currency that we have in Europe, the euro. And that revelation sent shocks to the European system initially. It was considered to be a major violation of responsibility, one of the values that Europe is built upon. And everyone looked at Greece and then at the euro and started trying to figure out what had gone wrong and how this could be corrected and avoided in the future. The debate has developed over the past year and a half. Initially, one thing was clear in everyone's mind, that Greece and the Greeks had to be, quote-unquote, punished, that they were living beyond their means, that they were not being responsible. And everyone was asking Greece to return back to that bed. And Greece has. We did violate responsibility. And I think that if you were to look at the Greek government, it has not shied away from self-criticism. But the past year has also been quite a bruising time for Greece. And basically because some negative stereotypes were developed, circulated, that made it extremely difficult for a very effective, very successful, and very proud people in the country to move to the path of recovery as fast as we would have liked. But this is what we've done. And try to compare, look at the changes the US is going through and the discussions we're having about fiscal consolidation here, and growth, and unemployment. Look at the changes that we did in only 1 year, back in 2010, to get a sense of the remarkable and very painful adjustment that Greece has been going through to defend itself and to defend Europe and the euro from that shock, the initial shock back in 2009. In only 1 year, we cut about 90,000 employees from the public services. That's 10% of the public service in 1 year. At the same time, we reduced the primary deficit, government deficit of the country, from 24 billion euros, that's about 35 billion dollars, to only 1.5 billion. That's in a year and a half. Just imagine what that means in terms of infusing efficiency in an inefficient system, but also how many jobs get lost, how many salaries get cut, how many pensions get cut. We, at the same time, embarked in a huge project of structurally reforming a country that needed reform. The pension system in 2010, in that 1 year again, was overhauled and changed. Pension ages went up. They were not that low, by the by. The Greek average pensioner left work at a higher age than the average European. But they were increased. The health system has been rehauled. A system that has been getting billions of dollars and wasting them because of inefficiency, because of entrance transparency, rehauled. Just think of how many vested interests lost their plush positions because of that rehauling. It took place. It still is, but it took place in 2010. The education system and the universities, such a vital growth setup in any advanced society, in Greece for decades have been suffering, again, from inefficiency, again, from vested interests. That was changed, and mind you, with the vote of the vast majority of the members of the Greek parliament, of different political parties. All this in just 1 year. Here's the most perhaps startling of these facts. The general deficit of the country fell by 5 percentage points, from 15.7% to 10 point something. If you think about the US economy, that would translate to about 700 billion euros. If you think of what that means in the US economy, that is the defense budget. So in 1 year, Greece managed, with huge pain of its people, with major political costs of its government, to cut the deficit by as much as the whole defense budget in the US would be had you made an equivalent cut. These are difficult changes. And today, we're still in trouble. When I say we, I don't simply mean Greece. I mean the perception of Greece and the perception of Europe and the States and around the world. How do we reach this point? Why are the markets still not buying Greek bonds? Why are people, serious politicians and analysts in financial newspapers around the world predicting our imminent demise? The drachma will be coming back. Greece will default. Well, there are reasons, and there are solutions to these reasons. And let me try to, very briefly, if you like, bullet point-wise, go through some of them. First reason is that we were not perfect in this past year and a half. By this I mean that we changed a tremendous amount, as I described, and I only gave you just the tip of the iceberg. But we didn't change other things that we should have. Now, one might be willing to allow for a few mistakes during the period of such changes, but not when the international spotlight is on you. So, for example, we didn't privatize as fast as we should have and wanted to, because it's a very difficult process to do the tens of billions of euros of privatizations that we have committed to do to our lenders, because we reached the point of having to receive major loans from the European Union, our partners in the EU, and from the International Monetary Fund. But that, if you were to look at the delays or the mistakes, had very little to do, really, in the end of the day, in my view at least, with the skepticism you see still flying around, surrounding Europe and surrounding Greece. And I say this because, for example, we have committed ourselves to reduce in 1 year the deficit by 5.5 percentage points instead of the 5 that we achieved. The 5 that we achieved, no other country in European history has ever achieved. But yes, there was a 0.5%, and we can go into some detailed discussion for anyone who's perverse enough to care about those economic things. But that 0.5% clearly, surely, could not by and in of itself create such anxiety. So what else do we have? Well, a second reason that we're in this stage still today, in other words, in a state of is that such major cuts and major changes create recessions. Recessions are inevitable when you have a tough and tight fiscal consolidation of that sort. Now, you can look at that recession and say, well, it's natural, it's going to take some time for all this to turn around, so let's give Greece or anyone else the chance to turn it around. Or, and this happened daily in many newspapers around the world, you can look at it and predict that no program will work, that Greece is doomed, and therefore to predict default. Now, what's the problem with that? The problem with that is that once you predict default, that can become a self-fulfilling prophecy, as many of you in this room who deal with finances know. Economy is psychology. So the mere prediction, even in the face of proven, undoubted, successful, major fiscal consolidation and structural reform changes, the mere prediction of default kept the markets closed. So though we made the changes, we still could not go out and borrow. Now, a third reason is that recession, in addition to the effect that I described to you, is, well, simply put, a recession. That means that many people are out of a job, your tax base shrinks, you cannot collect as many taxes as you would have predicted or wanted to collect, and therefore it is very difficult to close that deficit gap if you don't have enough earnings. So recession by definition again, especially if it is bigger than initially predicted, not by yourself, but by the International Monetary Fund and others who lent you the money, makes it very difficult to hit the targets you set for yourself. So you have to take then additional tough measures, very politically difficult, to try to hit those targets. The fourth reason that we're in this state is that at some point in Europe, about 6 months ago to 8 months ago, too many doctors, very vocal and with different recipes on how to save the patient, were hurtling around Greece's bed, debating in public, including the front pages of European newspapers, on what should be done. Should Greece go through more austerity, or should Greece, take a growth injection? Should the private sector participate in trying to help Greece get out of the problems, or should the private sector be left out of it? In other words, banks and others not contribute. Now, these are very interesting debates and very important ones, and we have them, you have them in the States. When they take place in public, when major European politicians or economists or bankers or others indicate that they're not sure where the boat should be headed, well, the markets assume that the boat at some point is bound to hit an iceberg. Even if it's not. Even if indeed, in the end, those doctors, when the patient is about to die, do find the right medicine to save the patient and to save themselves. But too much cacophony gave the chance to too many people in the markets to assume that this is not going to work out. Fifth reason that we're here today is that indeed conditions change around the world. So Greece embarked on this huge, difficult, but potentially very hopeful consolidation program at the time that the US didn't have its own problems and its own public fights between its major parties on what should be done. Which, of course, given how huge the US economy is for European purposes as well, did not help the stability in Europe. Ireland and Portugal, two other European countries, after Greece entered the support program with these loans, also were revealed to have serious debt and deficit issues and became incapable of borrowing money in the markets. So they too entered support programs by European and IMF loans. And suddenly people around the world started thinking that Europe, not just Greece, but Europe, is having a structural problem that is much bigger than what at the time was convenient to brand as simply the Greek outlier. And of course, that also scared the markets. And finally, because there's no such thing as the markets at the end of the day, but there are different types of investors and different types of interests, there's no question that what you had on top of all these other issues and problems was uncontrolled market speculation. There was a part of the markets who simply invested in seeing Greece fail. So whereas institutional investors were betting, hoping for a Greece that stabilizes, a Europe that stabilizes so they can invest their money in a stable environment, there were others, the infamous naked CDSs, default swaps, who were betting that Greece would collapse. And that kind of trillions of dollars betting, of course, affected the markets in the way that the markets looked at the future of Greece. There was this damned if you do and damned if you don't approach in many ways that we found, and we still find, frankly, quite frustrating. You know, what was interesting with Greece, when the debt and deficit problem was revealed back in 2009 or in 2010, the credit rating agencies started downgrading Greece because they said, look, Greece has a big debt, a big deficit, and they are not taking the necessary and painful fiscal consolidation measures in order to bring that debt and deficit down. And then Greece started taking these measures. Extremely tough ones. Measures that no other democracy had ever been called upon to apply in such a short period of time. And guess what happened then? The credit rating agencies downgraded Greece again. Because now they realized that all these consolidation measures brought recession. And because of the recession, everyone predicted that Greece could not get out of this. Have you seen the catch-22? And the funny thing about this whole thing is, I'm still sitting here, standing here, and I'm still alive, as is my country. We have managed, because all these predictions, in a sense, and in the end, are not based on the exact true facts of the situation, we have managed to fight against them. It has not been easy, and we know that we have a long way ahead of us, of many years of pain. However, both us and the Eurozone and Europe will survive this crisis. What do we have to do to ensure that? And here's where I, if you like, I end with a few policy and other suggestions that we've thrown on the table. We obviously need to deal with the recession. This is not just a Greek problem. This is a European one. Ireland proves it. Portugal proves it. Yesterday, Italy was downgraded by Standard & Poor's, I believe, because, again, they're predicting greater recession than assumed before. There is, in other words, a need for many European countries, not just Greece, to fiscally consolidate at a time that no one can afford recessions of too many years. So, how do you infuse more money into economies that cut? The answer is you need to find new sources of revenue. Now, a major debate in Europe has broken out the past few months, and we appear to be reaching a consensus, a debate that is such a taboo in the US that, well, I predict it won't be in a few months from now, because, you know, this is a global discussion. The globalized world cannot really that easily isolate into countries or different regions. But it is a financial transaction tax debate. In other words, to place a very low tax on financial transactions. Financial transactions today are virtually untaxed around the world. service industry that doesn't even pay a VAT tax. Now, given the fact that we all reached this major crisis to begin with, because of the financial markets making some major miscalculations, and that's putting it nicely, a few years ago, it is a little strange that we haven't considered that given the pain that many of our people are going through, unemployment, recessions, that those same markets who created that ruin should not pay a small, compared to the huge size, price in order to help the process. If, as you are cutting, because you must cut, there's no alternative for Greece than to bring the country to primary surpluses. That means major fiscal cuts. That means pain. There is no alternative to this. Anyone who tries to assume, hope, that they can escape that predicament is doing harm to the country and harm to the euro. But given all that, you need to grow as well. Shouldn't we find those resources? The European Union has said yes. The European Parliament has said yes. The German Chancellor has said yes. Most in Europe are saying this is the time to move to that direction. I would submit to you that this is the time as well for the US to begin that discussion with us. This is a G20 matter, really. It is not just a European one, but we need to begin this debate. Now, second thing we have to do, and we did, and this applies primarily and particularly to Greece. On the 21st of July of this year, the 27 leaders of the European Union decided that they were going to extend dramatically the maturity dates for the Greek loans given to Greece. We're talking about 110 billion euros. That's about 160 billion dollars, plus a second package coming now about the same amount. So you can imagine, we're talking a lot of money. Now, extend that, reduce the interest rate steeply. In other words, give Greece the necessary space to breathe and the necessary time for the difficult structural changes to begin showing their effects. When you're opening up, as we did in Greece, another thing I didn't mention before, but you know, about 150 professions that were closed and therefore not particularly competitive, that takes some time for the competitive advantages of that to show. So that's what the decision of 21st of July did. Now, the third thing that Europe has to do is to become more political, more economic, and more united. Europe in the late 90s, early 2000s created a common currency. But it did not create at the same time the common governing structures, economic union, political union, that would go along with the monetary one. Now, let me give you an example of this so that maybe it can be particularly well understood. You have 50 states, and you have a joint currency, the dollar. And you also have, to back that up, a common bond. It's called the Treasury bill. Now, if I'm investing in China or in Greece or in France, I don't sit there I don't particularly care to see if the economy of Indiana is better or worse than the economy of New York, or if Hawaii, has a debt problem that is bigger than California's. I don't care, because I have one currency, one treasury bill. I invest, if I want to, in the collective strength and power of those 50 states, in other words, of the United States of America. And that collective strength and power is what makes treasury bills the most sought after in the world. Now take the EU, 27 member states, 500 million citizens. The a free market, the absolutely biggest market in the world, huge financial productivity power, one currency, no treasury bill. So if I'm an investor, I start playing and speculating with the, different debt levels of the different 27 member states, trying to figure out who might be better, who might be worse. What's happened to the power of those 500 million people that a common bond could unite? Well, we don't have it. Because to have it, that requires a much closer coordination of the economies of those 27 member states. It requires those 27 member states to give up more power to a central body. And that central body, in order to be effective and legitimized, it has to be very democratically and transparently selected, which today the bureaucracy in Europe usually is not. So to get from A to B, that's growing pains extraordinaire. And this is what the financial crisis shocked Europe into realizing we have to do. But this takes time. You have 27 different countries in the EU, 27 different governments and parliaments, in different political cycles. Some countries just out of elections. Some countries about to go to elections. Some countries governed by coalition governments. Some countries governed by minority governments. One cannot ignore those 27 political circles, those 27 public opinions, when one tries to make such a huge change that gives collectively, with our own free will, more power centrally and away from what we have been used to be our own private national gains. Now this is called economic governance, and Europe has embarked on it, and it's a difficult debate. But for anyone willing to bet against Europe, think again, because we know what was lacking, and we're fixing it now. Now, we also need to deal, and Europe is dealing, and I think I made that clear with the examples I gave before, with a better regulation of markets. Choking markets is the biggest mistake anyone can make. Better regulating markets is something that we absolutely must. You know what is interesting? When our debt and deficit was revealed, everyone was very reluctant to lend us the money they lent us. No handouts, by the way. We are repaying every single euro of those loans already, and we will up to the last euro. Everyone was saying, well, there's a moral hazard with helping Greece. Because, they did all these terrible things. Now, this shouldn't get money that easy. They should hurt. They should be forced to change. They reached that point because of some structural problems in their country. So, give them the money, but force them to change. Fair enough. But let me ask you something. How many trillions of dollars and euros did we give to the financial sector and the banks back in 2007 and 2008 and 2009? Way more, surely, than what Greece has gotten in loans. Isn't there a moral hazard there as well? Didn't we all realize the debates in the US, the debates in Europe at the time, that we had a financial sector that was out of control? That we needed for the benefit of our peoples and of the financial sector itself, to ensure that those who took reasonable risks, those who didn't speculate against you or me, would be rewarded more than the others? So wasn't there a sort of moral hazard in actually bailing out all that system without, however, demanding a single real change in it? Is it fair to say there's a moral hazard if 10 million people have indeed lived above their means for a few years, but to ignore the moral hazard and the problem that exists when the whole market does the same? I don't think it's fair. I think it is to the benefit of everyone, not to punish or to castigate anyone sit down in a serious way and regulate in a transparent and fair way markets as well. Finally, dear friends, my country will not survive and do much better than surviving simply because we have shown the political will to do so, or simply because the Greek people have shown the wisdom to suffer through incredibly painful changes that in many cases are unfair for them. They were not responsible for this huge debt and deficit. Greece will survive, and Greece will reach its absolute potential, again, because it is a very rich country that was very poorly managed for a few years. But it is not a poor country. The sea, the sun, the wind, they are the oil of the 21st and the 22nd century. And Greece has them in tremendous abundance. Already, we are developing projects where hundreds of billions of euros and dollars can come to the country because we are developing, as we should have, many years now, and we didn't, hence our present troubles. In order to be one of the leaders in providing alternative energy to the country and to the rest of Europe, our neighborhood, and further on. Thank God that many of you are Greeks in this room. Is anyone who's not, by the way? Well, thank God we're pretty darn good, pretty darn educated, pretty darn resourceful, and pretty darn effective, both in Greece and outside of it, and we have been for many, many, many years. Now, what we have to do is to refocus that energy and that education level where it really matters. And this is precisely what we're doing today. Our tourism, this is our heavy industry in many ways. Guess what? It increased in the midst of the recession this year by over 20%. Now, this is where major investment can and will take place. You'd be surprised to know that pharmaceuticals in Greece is a huge business. Some of the most innovative people are in pharmaceuticals and are in Greece, not somewhere else, in Greece. Now that business is flourishing, as is IT. Crete has one of the most remarkable universities in Europe on those issues. Some of the most brilliant minds are in Greece or in Silicon Valley today, Greece, cooperating, communicating. This is after here I'm going to Los Angeles. One of the things that I will be attempting to do, bring some of these brilliant young Greek and non-Greek minds together so that they can figure out what to do. I'm the government. I'm perfectly well aware that I can do very little in terms of, all the bureaucracy I carry behind me. But if you manage to bring bright people together, that's where the magic happens. So a smart government, in my view, should be opening up those doors, not trying to control everything from the center. This is the Greece of the future, not only far future. This is the Greece of the immediate future. We are changing rapidly. By so doing, we're giving a future to the present and the next generation in Greece. A future that they probably wouldn't have otherwise had. By so changing, we are also looking for a responsibility to safeguard the Eurozone and the Euro. A currency that, in spite of this huge crisis in which we have been engulfed, is still extremely strong. It probably lost about 20 cents in the past year and then regained them again. That's for anyone who thinks that the euro will collapse. By doing so, and by changing ourselves to bring stability to the system, by changing Europe to bring stability to its members and to its economy as a whole, we are also, in my view, doing the best possible thing for strengthening US-European relations. I think it is no accident that Tim Geithner was with European finance ministers a couple of days ago, discussing this crisis and explaining how the US sees the importance of Europe binding together and fighting this together in solidarity. Or when 2 months ago Hillary Clinton visited Athens, and we had some remarkably good meetings. You'd be surprised by the way of the extremely warm reception that she received. How there too, she relayed her own and the administration's desire, not only to help Greece, but to help inspire Europe to get out of this crisis fast, because our economies are so interconnected that what happens to us happens to you and vice versa. So Greece is changing itself. This may sound a little grandiose, but let's hope that by changing ourselves and help change the world in a way that is different, that is fair, than the wrong direction we've taken the past few years. You know what, dear friends, I look at competitiveness. You talk about it in the United States. We talk a lot about it in Europe. And look at some countries in the world today that are deemed to be very competitive. And I see that in many cases they have virtually no labor standards. In other cases they have virtually no safety nets or pension systems to speak of. Or they feel free to develop by engaging in major environmental degradation because they don't have laws to protect the environment. Or in some cases, they're not even democracies. And I'm thinking, well, you know what? That may be a competitive advantage, but I submit to you it's a short-term one. Now, is that the model that Europe or the US wish to emulate? Or should we be investing in education, investing in healthcare systems, investing in research and development, putting money, in other words, that costs, in a competitiveness that is based on quality, not one that is based on inequality. And if we manage to live up to that promise, then I think we'll be building a much better world for ourselves and for our kids. I didn't mention once the word Turkey in this speech, thank you.
Minister, thank you for those very informative remarks. We do have some questions for you on foreign policy, and I suspect they actually touch on Turkey. Two questions. What is your perspective on current events in Cyprus, and what are your policy priorities there? It has been reported that Turkey is objecting to claims staked by Cyprus to offshore deposits of hydrocarbons. Will international law prevail, or do you foresee a confrontation?
All right, these are two related, very good questions. By the way, let me also say, because I worked for many years in Washington as a lawyer, and I knew that the workday 10 to 10 was not a time to be out listening to anyone speak. Not at the office or hitting the telephone. So thank you for saying this here. Look, I'll answer this very quickly. I hope succinctly. Turkey has occupied Cyprus. Half of it is occupied for over 35 years. And that in itself is the real crux of the problem. Under international law, since the question asked that is simply unacceptable. And the wall that exists now in Cyprus is the only standing wall in Europe after the Berlin Wall collapsed. This is just politically, legally, and morally not sustainable. But, 40,000 soldiers as an occupying army can sustain such things as that injustice, even in today's world. Now, unfortunately, what Turkey did the past couple of weeks was particularly problematic because it moved ahead in challenging Cyprus's right to explore its natural resources in its own continental shelf. And that is unfortunate, not simply because it challenges international law directly, but also because it affects major interests of Cyprus and the United States, for that matter, and other countries of the region, including Israel, interests of developing alternative sources of energy and energy transportation so that we can become energy independent. Because one of the major issues we have today is energy dependency, including the routes from which energy comes today. So developing this southern corridor is something that is deeply important to all of us. And this challenge, followed at some points by veiled military threats again, throws us back to a time that I would hope we wouldn't have to go to. Now, many people ask, well, given all that, what is the right thing to do with Turkey? My answer to this as a Greek and as a Greek foreign minister is that I will be vigilant and sort of relentless in terms of protecting my national interests and international law in these issues. But at the same time, I believe that the best way to ensure that Turkey changes, because that's where we are, that's our geography. We have been neighbors for centuries and we will be neighbors for many more centuries, is to ensure that Turkey gets integrated into the European Union, where it rightfully belongs if it changes dramatically to meet European standards, which today it does not, of course. That prospect for Turkey could, provided that it works as a catalyst for radical change, create a much more prosperous, a much more fair, and a much more peaceful Turkey. However, whether or not that will happen is not really in Greece's hands or in Cyprus's hands. It depends largely on a Turkey that apparently feels this days strong enough to be acting sort of in an old Ottoman grandeur kind of way that is unfortunately destabilizing the region, that is already in turmoil because of the Arab Spring, because of the Middle Eastern issue. It depends on Europe, that in the midst of the financial crisis may be a little tired of enlargements of new countries coming in, especially if one talks about a Turkey that is a big country and would need a lot of work and effort to make a change. So the environment for what I just told you, Turkey's European perspective, is not ideal today. But I think that we have an obligation to keep it alive. Because at the end of the day, that is in the ultimate interest of the Turkish people themselves. And it would certainly eventually work into the interest of peace and stability in our region, because Europe doesn't work with military threats. Europe doesn't work with ignoring international law. And peace is what we need.